the mother equations, which are the generic universal conservation equations, identifying them as the unified field equation, or the theory of everything, or the unilaw. The uni part, or the one equation part, is the fact that there may be 5. Einstein showed there are actually 4. This development shows there's 1. And if there's only one equation that people are looking for that describes everything, and we took the equation for everything and transformed it into 1, then it seems to me that those 1 equations are same and 1. And that's basically the summary.
You know, Hotep, one of the things that Dr. Oyibo was talking about, particularly towards when he was summarizing, was the concept of a mother equation, that at one point in time, everything was 1, just 1, and then out of that, everything came out of it. Just as atoms join nucleically and become molecules according to what the energy of the electron is, determines what will come out. The concept is the way back to the future is to be able to find out the common origin of everything and all. Now, the Shabaka stone has 3 philosophies. The first philosophy, this is the Shabaka stone. The first philosophy of the Shabaka stone is called the primate of the essences. This is the privilege that I take to do this. Essences, of course, are spelled with a C. There's always a smaller s, but I tend to do this because I want to get the sense of an essence, that there's a sense, and that the primate is the first, the origin, the beginnings of everything and all. Now, I'd like to keep in mind what Dr. Oyibo's talking about that mother principle, about that one essence from whence everything comes out of, but that at a point in time, prior to this Patayan impact, prior to this first turbulence, prior to the first movement, that everything and all resides in the waters of Nun. Now, when he talks of the wave theory, and he talks about the wave concept, it is said, and this is, of course, my research, everything and all is made up of waves. Everything comes in discontinuous straight lines, in other words, waves. Everything exists. I hear so-called physicists and others talking about the string theory. Okay, that is what they say everything is made up of. Well, our Kemetic ancestors had waves as being all and everything. And that at this point in time, everything resides in the waters of Nun. In other words, the concept of hydrogen. Unlike any water that we know of today, we're not talking about the waters that we know of today that we drink or that the rain, it is a unique sort of hydrogen plasma, an almost spiritualized matter. This is what I believe is the unified field theory symbolically, the waters of Nun. This is the mother equation, not the math part. That is what Dr. Oyibo works on. That's what mathematicians and physicists work on. From a theoretical perspective, from a symbolic perspective, this is the symbol for the letter N in Meduneter, or hieroglyphs. When you elongate it, it becomes the waters of Nun. This is why this is like 2 N's. This is where we get our alphabet from. Directly from Meduneter, which then became a scriptic language known as hieratic, and also had its demotic. But this is where all of this comes from. The waters of Nun. The Kemites in the Shabaka stone say that at some point in time, rising up out of the waters of Nun, at some appointed and anointed time in cosmic reality, in God's time, that there rose a primordial hill that was called Ptah. Ptah. Ptah is that turbulence, that point in time when energy at rest, or potential energy, which is in the waters. In the very beginning, the potential for life is in the waters. However, it has not actualized itself yet. So therefore, potential energy, energy at rest, then converts itself to energy in motion. This energy in motion makes Ptah rise up out of the hill. Now, this is a metaphor. This is a story. This is a theory. However, in this theory are the scientific principles, I believe, that Dr. Oyibo has written down on paper. This is why it's so important. Rising up out of the waters of Nun, through the energy and power of Ptah, coming up out of Ptah and sitting atop Ptah. Now, what's so important about that is that in sitting on Ptah, the theory that our Kemetic ancestors are saying is that Atum had to separate itself from Ptah. However, at the same time, it joined onto Ptah and became what would be later called the unmoved mover. Atum. Atum, to the Greeks, they said, was indivisible. But they themselves proved themselves wrong later on by being able to break it into protons, neutrons, and electrons. And there are those that even break it down into quarks and leptons in Yang and Mills field. Again, I'm not trying to impress you with this because I didn't know this. I've learned this. And I've learned this because I've been exposed to my culture. And we are saying that when our children are exposed to their culture, they will want to learn this. See, because the Galileos and with respect to all of the others, they got it from us. Because they come upon at a time when the Moors are just being driven out of Europe. So where did this so-called Renaissance come from? How can you have a Renaissance if you've never had a naissance? That's the true miracle. How can you be reborn if you've never been born? The Moors, once again, coming into Africa, teaching these Europeans, coming into Europe, teaching Europeans of the math and science. In fact, they even taught them how to speak Greek. That's how they even studied Aristotle in the first place. It was the Moors that translated this into a language that could be understood. Now, here is where, when Dr. Oyibo talks about the powers, the four is a very important number in many African nations. Particularly when you take 4 and then you make pairs from the 4. So not only do you have the 4, but you have the essences of the opposing factors of each 4. So it's more than just having something. You have something and its nothing counterpart. Or that something that cannot be seen, which Dr. Oyibo talks about as the hidden or the unseen force. This is the primate of the essence. This is philosophy number 1 of the Shabaka stone that was rewritten on an older document known as Memphite text. Now we have the second philosophy, which we are calling the essences of pre-existing order and arrangement. Now, the reason why I use this term, because this in science, in math, philosophy, however you want to look at it, is also called the Ogdo. The Ogdo. This that we teach in science, in all of these textbooks, same thing written on the Shabaka stone. But in the Shabaka stone, like a lot of African literature, it is written in figurative language. Therefore, if you look at it literally, you're going to see it as a fairy tale. However, if you're scientifically inclined, you'll read through the metaphor into the scientific principles that this metaphor, this allegory, this analogy, this story is masking. Atum, we still have the same primate, but this primate, Atum, calls into being 4 pairs. The first pair is Nun and Nunet. Important because at this point, Nun is unnamed. See, remember in all of the holy books it talks about God being on the face of the waters, but because God, the spirit, the energy, doesn't know itself, cannot call itself into being, it must create creatures that will know God. So at this point in time, Nun cannot call herself into being. It doesn't have the energy, so therefore it creates within itself, this mother equation creates within itself the ability. But the first step is not just doing it, it's a process. It is as Dr. Oyibo talks about, a transformation, which to the Kemites is called Kepra. It is symbolized by the dung beetle. the metaphor. So, Nun Nunet comes into being through the naming of Atum, or the self-created one, because that is what Atum, from the Kemetic perspective, we believe means. Nunet is the counter heavens, or space. You see, the law of opposites is happening. Dogon called this twinness, and they too have 4 pairs in their creation story. So does Congo. They have 4 pairs. You can go throughout Africa, and in many ways there is a repetition, there is a pattern in the thought process of the theory of the creation of the universe. But however simplistic it may be, it has within it deep, complex philosophies. And one of the most brilliant things about our ancestors is that they took such deep thoughts and made it so that if you were a farmer, you could understand it. If you were a shepherd, you could understand it. If you made shoes, you could. Everything in your life could be brought into being through, as Dr. Oyibo talks about, the mother equation. So therefore, the mother equation applies to everything in the universe according to the relationship that essence has with the greater force or the universe. Very simple, very brilliant, very much to what we teach our children. But because we don't look at Medunete or African language through metaphor, through figurative language, through personification and symbol, we miss the scientificness of what it is that they're saying, and we dismiss it as some fairy tale or some religious allegory. But deep within it is God, yes, but also sacred. You have the spirit, you have the material. You have the sacred, you have the science. The second pair that was called into being, Ha-het. Ha being infinity, and Ha-het being finity. In other words, within the universe, the parameters of the universe, there is the water, the material, there is the space or the counter heavens. Now what's growing is the concept of the idea of things never having an end, and things having an end. The next pair was called into being, remaining in the waters of Nun, was Kuk and Kuket, darkness and light, star power, solar power, the essence of the superclusters, the clusters, the galaxies, the solar systems, all the celestial bodies were held within the context of this story coming out. That which can be seen in terms of light and that which cannot be seen. And then the final pair, called into the waters of Nun, Amen and Amenet. The hidden and the revealed. These are the 4 pairs that we're calling, and they remained in the waters of Nun. Now check this out. They remained in the waters of Nun as frogs and snakes. Why frogs? Well, frogs, their metamorphosis. In fact, the reason why we study frogs in biology class is because their central nervous system and our nervous system is almost identical. That is why we use frogs. I mean, why don't we use other animals when we dissect things to find out in biology what we look like? Well, if that's true, that means that our ancestors understood the relationship between the physiology, the body of a frog, and the body of humanity, which again goes back to Dr. Oyibo's concept of being able to find a mother principle. How could a frog and a human be so much alike? Well, if you even look at the development of a frog from the egg to the tadpole to the frog, you're actually watching how the central nervous system is born within the blastula of that embryo, and how the entire brain and central nervous system is formed looks exactly like a tadpole when you open up the fetus. This is heavy stuff for Kemites to have known at this particular time in history, because if they knew this, it took them thousands upon thousands of years just to get to that knowledge alone. So you can see how massive this is and what it is that Dr. Oyibo is uncovering and putting down on paper as mathematical equation, variables within this play. Now, these are the 2 philosophies that I would like to deal with in terms of the Shabaka stone, but I would also like to now move into what made me think about this in terms of the unified field theory. And from what I understand, as Dr. Oyibo is talking about, is that making everything collapse into one, the integumentary system of the body is everything that is outside the human body. Includes skin, fingernails, toenails, hair. All that is part of what is known as the integumentary system. Just like you have a circulatory system, a digestive system, the integumentary system is everything on the outside, if you can imagine, with the skin being your largest organ. Max Planck and others, Dr. Oyibo can expand in terms of quantum physics. The study of the atom inside. In other words, the quantum physics deals with everything from skin in. Professor Einstein's theories in terms of the special and the general law of relativity that Dr. Oyibo was developing and discussing is everything skin out, or the outer world, the stars, everything out here. So the concept of the unified field theory in the research I did is the uniting, is the bridge between the skin out and the skin in. And that they are saying that the same pattern microcosmically follows the same pattern macrocosmically. And that if you understood this unified field theory, that piece that unites outside and inside, that you could then develop a way in which you could call upon the forces of the cosmos at your will. Our African ancestors understood how to do this. Much of their writing deals with these concepts. What we have got to do as a people is understand our role in all of this and to recapture this. And I know it's very difficult for anybody to see someone of color dropping this kind of wisdom. But it is not that far-fetched when you know that we taught the world this wisdom. So as we said in the beginning, it is not so much that we are innovating, we are not inventing anything. We are innovating through remembering. We are remembering what we've done in order to take it to another level. Hotel. But I would like to just talk to Dr. Oyibo and just get into this, because I would just like, and this is the theory that was printed in Our Times Press. When was that, so we can get that?
January.
1999.
1999, that's correct.
I was given this. We have had Dr. Oyibo come and present to our community and our children on 2 occasions. We knew of Dr. Oyibo. I knew of his turbulence, because the moment he told me about his book in Turbulence, I knew that was Ptah, which goes back to the Shabaka stone. But when I saw this formula, this just literally, just, it opened up a whole nother way of looking at this particular time. And what I'd like to do is just look at it for the way it is, and I'd like to go through this and talk about the variables with Dr. Oyibo so we can get a sense of what it is, because believe me, I'm not that far from many of you. And this is a learning experience for me also. I believe this will change the world. You talk about a new world order. If you wanted a mathematical equation that would be the basis for that new world order, it is this formula. This is a living formula. This is not just math to equate and do. You can do things with this. You can build buildings with this. You can make clothes with this. You can meditate and join the ancestors with this if you understood how all this fits. And it's important that we get back into our roots, that information you can't use, you wasted your time learning it. I would not waste my time doing this if I did not think it would do something for me and for you and for us as a people. What I'd like to do is look at this from understanding what we just talked about in terms of the Kemetic origin of the universe. Here. I'd like to now take just these 2. There's a third philosophy that we can get into later, but I just want to deal with these 2. And I'd like to take this apart, and I'd like to talk to Dr. Oyibo and to see what we can do. Now, what I said, Dr. Oyibo, was that G, as a variable, is the balance, what we call the balance of natures. We said that 0, 0, and 0, 1, and all of the numbers also had a role in terms of the 4 pairs. But what we wanted to do was we wanted to get to the little g. This is the large G. We wanted to get to the little g. And so we said that the little g is equal to the physical manifestations. Or the boundaries, the parameters, as Dr. Oyibo said, the boundaries of the universe. We said that the large N, because you see that the large N is here. This is the large N. We said that the large N is the sense of the nature or the essence that you cannot see. So therefore, N became what we want to call meta.
It's that the Greek name for that letter is eta.
Is that right?
That's right.
You see, now I didn't know that. So this, again, this is a building process, and I think that this discussion should be what the future holds, think tanks.
It's exactly this.
Interesting. Very interesting. Because then you can see the concept.
Yes.
Because remember what N is, it's none. This is why this was so attractive to me. Because I never spoke to Dr. Oyibo, yet he has put the parameters. He has put the equal sign on the other side to be NN, which, by the way, is what the Chemites said was none. It's right there. He's labeled it. This is how I know he's on the right track. It makes me no difference what any other physicist or mathematician does. For all I'm concerned, they could be right. What I know is Dr. Oyibo is right. And that's a large difference.
Yes. You know, this this variable determines the geometry, and Einstein had visited this variable in his own way. Newton visited that. All of them, everyone, visited that, but not in this form, in a simpler form. They visited it, when n equal 0, 1 or 0. Okay? This n can go from it's infinity. You go to 1, 2, 3 to infinity, minus 1, 2, 3 to infinity. You can go in all directions. It's the entire universe.
And that is the underpinning of Nun.
That's right.
Nun is the underpinning of everything and all, right. Something, nothing.
That's right. Well, the classical results has n is equal to 1. But in that case, so if n is equal to 1, you have t to power 2 here, x to power 2, y to power 2, z to power 2. And that will be 5. That is a form of that has been used to generate the results. In that case, they will also say that this and this and this and this are equal. And for 85 years or 100 years, they never went above n equal 1. And this never existed. Now they can go, n can go to infinity or minus infinity. They've only dealt with 2.
We found the variables that you have put,
Yes.
t
Yes.
is equal to nun nunet. X is ha, ha het.
Yes.
Cuck, coquette. And the z
Z.
is amen and amenet.
Amen.
This is what we've found.
Amen.
My brother,
Yes.
when you look at this,
Yes.
and you look at this bottom one,
Yes.
one of the keys to understand is that we understand why these variables in place.
Yes.
T in meduneter, when you add T,
Yes.
it becomes feminine,
Yes.
which is birth,
Yes.
being born.
Yes.
we can understand why your first one would be t.
Yes.
Your x
Yes.
being that variable
Yes.
of ha het.
Yes.
The y,
Yes.
ket.
Yes.
Because they are natural progressions.
Yes.
As you end something,
Yes.
you begin something. So therefore, amen and amenet
Yes.
clearly could be z.
Yes.
Because it is from here, the concept now, the metaphor.
Yes.
You end and you begin again.
Yes.
When we see the n+1, we see this as the metaphor for the law of polarity. That for everything that you have its opposite. So that this piece, n+1, becomes the law of polarity, which then splits the t, which makes it net. You also have here the n+1, which makes this ha het. You have the n+1 ket,
Absolutely.
amen and amenet.
Absolutely.
This is astronomy.
Yes.
This is coming from a brother who wasn't necessarily interested in this, but sitting at the feet of someone like John Henry Clark, and then being able to expand into the works of Sheikh Anta Diop and Theophilus Obenga, teaching children astronomy in kindergarten and first and second grade, wanting to teach them from their perspective. We combined it all together. Now, what all that Dr. Oyibo has said, I'm saying we can teach the second graders on their own metaphoric, mature level.
Absolutely.
We can teach it, and they can be the future pyramid builders.
Absolutely.
They can be the future thinkers of our world, because what Dr. Oyibo has done is that he has written it down. What I have done is I have theorized it. I have put it in a context that I could understand so that the community could understand.
Yes. Yes.
What's so dynamic about what Brother and I are doing here is that this is a novice. This is you. I'm speaking on your behalf because I'm learning, just as you're going through this, I'm learning this.